The Indian government put out its estimates for the Kharif crop output this year. The figures seem somewhat gloomy given that India is aspiring for relatively healthy GDP growth rates compared to the rest of the world where the global economy is stuttering. Let's see what these crop estimates mean for you and me. Hello and welcome back to Business Matters at the Hindu with me, K. Bharat Kumar. So why is this news about estimates for the Kharif crop output so important to you and me? This is because this Kharif season contributes to about 60% of the annual crop output in India. Kharif crops are sown at the beginning of the southwest monsoon season, that is around end May to early June, and are harvested post the monsoon rains, beginning October. Rice, maize, pulses such as urad, moong, and millets are among the key Kharif crops. Farmers also take advantage of the northeast monsoon, and those crops are sown in the latter part of the calendar year, or the Rabi season. This time around, the first estimates for Kharif show that the total food grains production has been estimated 4.6% lower at 148.57 million tons. Not only is the estimate lower than last year's output, it is far lesser than the targeted 158 million tons for this year. Rice, which is a major Kharif crop, will see production 3.8% lower at about 106 million tons against last season's output. The government had targeted rice production of 111 million tons for this year's season. The area under paddy is estimated higher by around 2 lakh hectares this year compared to the previous year. So what exactly has happened? Obviously, if rice has seen higher acreage, then it should see higher production, but that has not happened. As my colleague in Business Line Prabhudatta Mishra tells us in an article, the driest August this year since 1901 has affected crop yield at many places. Overall, the southwest monsoon season has seen deficient rainfall, that is the time between June and September of this year. The same report tells us that this year, the southwest monsoon set in late and heavy rains lashed some parts of the country in July. August, in contrast, witnessed a 32% deficient rainfall before normalcy was restored in September. The monsoon withdrew on October 19th. The US weather agency NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has said that 21% of India is reeling under drought because of El Nino, or the phenomenon that causes ocean currents to become warm. For more details on this phenomenon, check out the Did You Know section at the end of this episode. We've seen some poor news on the rice fronts. How about other crops? The chart on your screens will tell you that most other crops will likely witness lower output than last year. Across pulses, moong, urad, sugarcane, oilseeds, soya bean, maize, and millets, you will see a decline estimated between 5.5% going all the way to 23%. Going against the grain, pun intended, the estimates of tur alone seem to give us some positive news. Tur is estimated to go up by 3.3% compared with the previous year, even though the area under cultivation is going down by 5%. That has stumped observers a bit because if area under cultivation goes down, obviously production will be hit, but that does not seem to be happening. We can only wait and watch as to what the final estimates will tell us. If you do not belong to the agriculture ecosystem, and if you'd seen this piece of news in the media about Kharif crop estimates being lower, you'd most likely have ignored this piece. After all, how many people do you know that read details about moong and urad production and so on? But think of it. If the Kharif crop accounts for 60% of India's grain output in a year, and if that crop output is going to falter, what does it mean to food prices? The food and groceries that you buy at your supermarket will tend to go up naturally. Simple economics will tell you that if supply of a particular item will not be as much as it used to, and if the demand remains at the same place or goes higher, then obviously prices will shoot up. The Reserve Bank of India has been fighting inflation since early 2022 when it began raising interest rates. Generally, when inflation goes up, central banks tend to raise rates with an aim to cool down demand and hence temper inflation. In our case, the RBI has recently held rates steady because it has seen inflation stabilizing, but it is still in a wait-and-watch mode. But a lower agri output could actually spur inflation. The Reserve Bank of India has been emphatic in that it wants to target a 4% inflation. It's actually the midpoint of the 2 to 6% tolerance band that it is allowed. So it's been emphatic saying we will not allow inflation to merely stay within this band, but will actually want to bring it down to 4%. While inflation has eased recently from highs earlier, the 4% target is still not in sight. And if food prices go up unrelentingly, this could spur overall consumer inflation, in which case a return to a regime of higher interest rates is not unthinkable for us. As the CII, or the Confederation of Indian Industry, said in an article late last month, insufficient rainfall has contributed to inflation, especially among pulses and coarse cereals, which can potentially impact food security. The presence of El Nino raises concerns about future rainfall patterns that can further have an adverse effect on crop production, yield, and inflation rates. For context, India's retail inflation eased from 6.83% in August to 5.02% in September, breaking a 2-month streak above the tolerance threshold of the RBI, with the rise in food prices easing to 6.6% from almost 10%. Another Business Line article quotes the former chief of the CSCP, or the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, as saying that lower Kharif output isn't exactly a disaster. He says that the milk and livestock sectors are the biggest contributors to farm growth in India. He says a little downward pressure on crops can be compensated by reasonably good output from livestock and fisheries. If that happens, he says, he doesn't think overall it would be terrible. However, Bank of Baroda chief economist Madan Sabnavis is not as sanguine. He says the situation is indeed serious. He points out that if the agri output as estimated for the Kharif season indeed comes out lower, then it could shave off GDP by 0.1 to 0.2%. So far, we've seen the domestic impact of lower agri output, but there is also a global effect. A recent Reuters report pointed out that India accounted for 40% of global rice exports. A lower output could mean that government could bring in more restrictions on the export of rice. There are already some curbs existing from the past. So this could affect rice prices globally. Like I said earlier in this episode, if demand is the same or rises and if supply is lower, then prices would go up. Those are the factoids and perspectives that we have for you right now, but we're keen to hear from you. How have your monthly expenses behaved over the last 24 months? We'd love to hear from you. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. But before we go away, do hear us out in our Did You Know and quiz sections. Did you know that El Niño means little boy in the Spanish language? South American fishermen first noticed periods of unusually warm waters in the Pacific Ocean in the 1600s. El Niño is a phenomenon that affects the way the wind blows in the Pacific Ocean. This affects climate patterns across the globe. During normal conditions, trade winds blow west along the equator, taking warm water from South America towards Asia. The NOAA says that when El Niño strikes, trade winds weaken. Warm water is pushed back east towards the west coast of the Americas. El Niño can affect weather significantly. The warmer waters cause the Pacific jet stream to move south of its neutral position. With this shift, areas in the northern US and Canada are drier and warmer than usual, but in the US Gulf Coast and Southeast, these periods are wetter than usual and have increased flooding. This week's quiz question is, name the weather phenomenon that has exactly the opposite effect on Pacific waters as El Niño does. It's interesting, right? Both of these phenomena have opposite effects but can equally be harmful to crops. Here's the answer to last week's question, which was, what will happen if your body does not produce enough cortisol? There's a condition called adrenal insufficiency, also referred to as Addison's disease. This condition prevents your body from maintaining essential life functions. One of the complications of this disorder is inadequate cortisol production. Untreated, the severe lack of cortisol during times of physical stress, such as injury, surgery, or illness, can cause life-threatening low blood pressure, low blood glucose, low blood sodium, and high blood potassium. Cortisol helps control all of these blood parameters. That's all we have for you this week, but before you go away, do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and importantly, click on the bell icon. Till we meet again, have a lovely week ahead.